Since humans have been able to communicate with each other, we have been finding new and innovative ways to enhance that communications. We have used everything from smoke signals to satellites to help us communicate over distances, and we have used everything from paints on cave walls to Facebook timelines to help us communicate across time. This video is a short history of some of the key innovations in communications. One thing that struck us as we compiled this history is how many of the innovations build on each other. Although many of the advancements made would have been classified as technological discontinuities as defined by Anderson and Tushman, the once architectural innovation remains as either a significant player or, if relegated to more of a niche, still retains some prominence. It is rare that we abandon a form or technology for communicating entirely. Humans are using more ways of communicating, not just simply changing how we communicate. Obvious innovations like mail, invented in 550 BCE, remains to this day and is more popular than ever as a way of getting physical stuff from A to B. Semaphore, invented in 1684, was widely used for maritime communications, but was replaced by electronic communications, starting with Morse code in 1836 and in spoken word radio broadcasts. Semaphore is still used today in some unique situations. The peace sign, for example, is a semaphore signal for N and D, standing for nuclear disarmament. Now you know. Morse code was used extensively to communicate over large distances. It is now used mostly by Boy Scouts. However, you can still hear it almost every day. Trains, when approaching a crossing, blast out the long, long, short, long, which is Q in Morse code and also means alert. And everyone knows SOS. It sounds like this. It's an emergency signal. It was augmented with the verbal Mayday in 1927, but SOS is still used today to ask for help. In the 1800s, innovation really started to explode. The telephone was invented in 1876. This required that a series of technologies come together, including broadcasting, reception, amplification, and microphone technologies. This is a great example of what Matisse referred to as the regime of appropriability, how people can actually profit from innovation. In the case of the telephone, innovators tried to protect their technology through patents. On February 14, 1876, both Elisha Gray and Alexander Graham Bell filed patent applications for telephone-like devices. Bell's was actually received several hours after Gray's, but Bell had wily lawyers who requested that it be registered in the blotter right away, thus usurping Gray. On March 7th, Bell's U.S. patent entitled Improvements in Telegraphy was granted, covering, quote, the method of and apparatus for transmitting vocal or other sounds telegraphically by causing electrical undulations similar in form to the vibrations of the air accompanying the said vocal or other sounds. On March 10, 1876, the first telephone transmission is made. It sounded like this.
Mr. Watson! Come here, I want you!
The patent wars continued during this period of fermentation with competing technologies and their accompanying patents, improving on the base premise. Bell's company almost folded because they couldn't create an acceptable microphone, something that Gray's company successfully did and of course protected. The technology has incrementally advanced and changed over the years, but fundamentally has remained as voice over wire. The disruptive technology of cellular communications came along in 1973, with the first real commercial phones available in 1983. This threatened to make obsolete the idea of wired communication to each home. However, another little disruptive technology, called the Internet, was creating a competency-enhancing disruption for the telcos. They had this massive infrastructure and could bring Internet to the home in a way that wireless couldn't, at least not yet. Usage shows that wireless phone connections have seemed to have plateaued. In North America, wired connections are still very prevalent because of the massive infrastructure. In developing countries, however, they are leapfrogging this technology, opting instead to install cellular towers instead of investing in copper wire.
The introduction of MIT's compatible time sharing system in 1961 was the first time multiple users were able to log into a central system from remote dial-up terminals and to store and share files on a central disk. Informal methods of using this to pass messages developed and were expanded to create the first true email system. An integral part of email, and a piece that really played a key role in the adoption of email, was the invention of the Internet. Prior to the Internet, email adoption trajectory would have been relatively flat. However, the Internet enhanced the email performance trajectory as Bauer and Christensen would have described it. Without this complementary innovation, email would not have the use pattern it has today, and in fact would not likely be the dominant design that it currently is, especially for business use. As this picture illustrates, the Internet has an incredible positive impact on our ability to be connected to the World Wide Web. This graphic illustrates the density of traffic globally, and as you can see, the connectivity from North America and Europe. Now, the internet looks complex, and for users like me, it is. But the reason it was adopted so quickly and is used so often is because it was so easy to learn and to use. And you can see that the adoption rate has increased substantially. And now let's face it, many of us have become very dependent on email. Could you imagine one day without your email? In 1989, Rani Fortini sent what was believed to be the first text message to a friend in Melbourne Beach, Florida. The first text message consisted of numbers that represented letters. Interesting that this innovation was also believed to have been born out of necessity, as both Fortini and his friend were basically broke, but still looking for a way to communicate. Now, as we know, text messaging has changed from numbers representing letters to now actual messages through letters, and the use has exploded. One could say that with the adoption of text messaging into current culture, we've really learned how to have a conversation 160 characters at a time. With the acceptance and access to text messaging devices, texting has become a world unto its own, creating its own dictionary and even creating a tremendous amount of speculation on how this will impact the spelling ability of today's youth. This dictionary has become quite recognizable to the point that most know what these shortened words mean. We'll keep you posted. Laugh out loud. Talk to you later. Best friends forever. What the? Just kidding. When you stand back to reflect on it, isn't it incredible how easy texting has made it to have a conversation with the person next to you? Although there have been many innovations through the years in the industry of communication, there have been limited discontinuous innovations. The communication industry was built more on incremental change rather than radical change. However, as we discussed, complementary innovations like the internet did assist in changing the game. The innovations that would have been architectural change, as Abernathy and Clark would describe, like mail, still exist today. Like mail, other forms of communication continue to exist, but maybe just in niche areas. There are many forms of communication that just haven't gone away. I find it interesting now that what I thought was so incredibly cool and far out, like the video phone and the Jetsons, really is Skype today, although I guess we are living in the future. I suppose that leads us to ask the question, what will communication look like in 25 years?